Hello and welcome to Slightly Nostalgic. My name is Griff and we have watched Firefly, episode 5, Safe. Alright, this one's not, I tend to forget about this episode. It's not an awesome one, it's not a bad episode. I'd say there aren't any bad episodes of Firefly, but it's certainly not the worst one, also not the best. It's the one where they land on the planet to sell the cows, things go wrong, Book gets shot, River and Simon get kidnapped, and they gotta go patch up Book at the Alliance facility, and then they come back and rescue Simon and River. So that's all that happens in this episode. But there are still some fun moments, and some of my favorite quotes are in this episode, so let's just talk about that stuff. The first thing I wrote down was Tiny Zac Efron. I forgot he played young Simon, and it looks really weird to me. For some reason, anytime I see him like older or younger than the High School Musical version of Zac Efron, it just looks totally wrong. After that weird little flashback, we go back to the present day on the ship, and River's making a bunch of noise, doing her usual crazy thing, and Mal comes in, he's like, you gotta keep her quiet or she's gonna disturb the cows, and that will be a problem on a spaceship. River says something about like how long it takes a person to die in the vacuum of space or something, and then Mal says one of my favorite quotes of the series where he says, morbid and creepifying I got no problem with, long as she does it quiet like. Anyway, in this whole first part of the episode, I found Simon to be kind of unlikable, actually. He was kind of irritating. Like, he just comes across as really whiny and unreasonable, where, like, his big conflict with Mal in the beginning is River is wandering around the cows and everything, being all crazy, and Mal's just like, hey, you need to get her out of here, take her somewhere else, because we're gonna try to sell these cows. There's a serious business transaction taking place here. I can't have this crazy fugitive girl wandering around causing problems. So, like, of course she needs to not be there for that. But Simon talks like it's just this crazy thing that he's asking him to do. Like, what? I can't take her somewhere else. We can't go into town. Why would we do that? Like, it's just strange. And then later, when he's talking to Kaylee in the town, he, first of all, curses a lot, which is interesting, especially around Kaylee, because in a future episode, she points out that, hey, what, you don't ever curse, and they make a big deal about him being really polite and everything. But in this episode, he curses several times in English and Chinese, and sometimes even in front of Kaylee, so maybe they just forgot about those lines later on or something, I don't know. Also, if he's so worried about them being found, why are they using their real names? Why, like, I guess he can't really control what River does, but why is he introducing her to people as River? Like, that's her real name, and they're known wanted fugitives. You'd think he'd make up a name for her. Anyway, going back to the other side of things with the whole cow selling business, I was trying to pay really close attention to find out if they do in fact get paid, even though the whole thing goes sideways, and they do. But it's interesting because when Book is laying on the ground injured and Mal is singing to him, Jane is over here like, well, did you grab the money though? And Mal gives him this dirty look. But later they make a point to show us that he did indeed grab the money on their way back to the ship at some point, even though they were rushing to get Shepherd Book onto the ship. Like, he pulls the money out and sets it aside. It's like, okay, they did get paid. So then we get to probably the most interesting part of this episode for new viewers, which is the big revelation, or a hint at a future revelation maybe, of something really crazy going on with Shepherd Book. Up until now, there have just been little hints that he just knows a lot about a lot of things for a preacher. Something's been kind of weird about him, but this is like the big confirmation that, like, okay, he has some kind of connection to the Alliance, because he has an ID card of some sort that makes any old Alliance officer who sees it immediately go, okay, we need to help this guy right now, get him on the ship and give him medical attention, even though they had just said, no, we can't just let random people on the ship to use our hospital or whatever. And the fact that they let them on, treated him, and then let them go scot-free, even though they knew, like, their papers were out of date, and that, you know, there are wanted fugitives, Simon and River, stowed away on a Firefly somewhere that they're looking for, and they don't even bother to check this out. It's weird. And we never find out exactly why this happens. We don't ever find out anything really specific about Shepherd Book's past, but looking at this logically, if Shepherd Book was like a former agent or a current agent of the Alliance undercover or something, he must still be on assignment. If they're like, it's not like he left, it's not like he gave it up and left, and I don't know, maybe you have a lifetime free medical attention plan with special agents of the Alliance. I don't know, but it seems more likely that they're implying that he is still on assignment and that he is on the Firefly to do Alliance work of some kind. And but then it's like, well, why isn't he turning in the fugitives? Was he there to do something more important? I don't know. It raises so many questions, and it's so frustrating that they were never really answered. Back over in Hillbilly Town with Simon and River, there's this really emotional moment that I didn't remember at all, but I really liked this time, where River kind of has this lucid moment where she tells Simon, I know this is hard for you. I know you gave up so much to find me. And I wrote down the actual quote. It's, you gave up everything you had to find me. You found me broken. And it's just like, man. And that just reminded me of how I felt about them in the pilot, I think it was, when I said that relationship really stands out to me, that sibling bond. And Simon's heroism of sacrificing so much to save his sister, it just really gets to me this time through. I think the flashbacks really point that out too, of how much Simon gave up. It wasn't just his career and his money, it was his relationship with his parents, because really they were just huge jerks about the whole thing, didn't believe him at all, and thought he was just going nuts. And it makes me wonder what their parents think is happening. Like, what do they think happened to their kids? Do they think that Simon just went crazy and ran away from home and that River is still at the academy? Is it common knowledge that they're fugitives? And like, is it on the 6 o'clock news on the core planets, or do they just not know what happened? Another thing I hadn't thought about before is how this is basically our confirmation that River is indeed psychic. Like, there's something more than just being really intuitive going on here. Up until now, everything could kind of be explained away of how she knew things, or if it just kind of seemed like she knew more than she did. But in this one, she knows things that she couldn't know otherwise unless she is literally reading people's minds. Like how she knew the leader of Hillbilly Town killed the previous leader, and she knew what happened to that little girl's family, even though she hadn't talked. And it brought up the question for me, do the others know if she's psychic? Like, have they noticed that she knows things that she couldn't possibly know, the rest of the crew and everything, and especially Simon? Like, in this episode, he's there for the times when she is making it super obvious that she has some kind of supernatural mind-reading ability. Is he just not notice, or he just doesn't really think about it yet because they're busy with other things, and we see him, like, we never really, I don't think we ever see him really processing that information. Even though later on in this episode, Mal actually says, when somebody says, she's a witch, he says, yeah, but she's our witch. Like, so is he just being whimsical when he says that, or does he know that she is psychic or something, and it's just accepted that that's fine? Maybe there's other psychics. Maybe that's just a thing in the future. And of course, I just have to point out that one of the best, most recognizable quotes in the whole series is in this episode when they come back to save River and Simon, and Mal says, what does that make us? And Zoe says, big damn heroes, sir. And he says, ain't we just? Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's such a great scene. And that's all I've got for this episode. So be sure to watch the next one, which is Our Mrs. Reynolds, a big fan favorite. So looking forward to that. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Okay, bye.